world, please do join the conversation, write in the comments box. It's the only way that we really know, who is out there, who's watching. So let us know, come in and tell us a bit about yourselves, where you're from, so that we can chat with you during the conversation today. We've got a great show for you today. As ever, we've got Julia Onslow-Cole, who's going to be updating us on all the things relating to global immigration. We've got Michelle Durkin from Benivo, who's got some polling and research that she's going to share. And we've got some great special guests. We've got Steve Brink, who is the President and CEO of AIRINC. So we're delighted to have Steve on the show. And we've also got Morgan Crosby, who's the Global Growth Leader at AIRINC. So two wonderful thought leaders from AIRINC, which is just absolutely fabulous to have you all with us today. So we're looking forward to a great show. But as ever, even before I start the show, I'd like to just tell you about what's going to be happening next week. And next week's guest, so this time next week, I'm delighted to say that our special guest will be Kerwin Guillermo. Now, Kerwin he may be known to many of you. He's the head of global mobility at HPE, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, but also he's the chairman-elect at Worldwide ERC. So it'll be a great honor and privilege to have Kerwin on the show next week, and we're certainly looking forward to a great conversation with him. But also, I do want to tell you about one other thing, which is I always like to share a little bit of breaking news. And the breaking news is that we're launching a new series. Obviously, we've got The View from the Top, and that comes out every Wednesday. But we're launching a new series called Benivo Bites, and that's going to come out every other Thursday, starting tomorrow, and then 2 weeks' time after that, every other Thursday. And that is going to focus on technology and all the latest developments in mobility technology. And we're starting off on what I think will be a fascinating show tomorrow, is that we're going to talk about creating an Amazon-style experience for mobility. Now, to me, mobility technology in many ways has been stuck in a little bit of a rut, and it hasn't been consumer grade. And let me explain what I mean by that. If I want to buy something on Amazon, I don't have to download the Amazon technology. I don't have to do an Amazon implementation. I don't have to have lessons in how to use the technology. It's all user friendly. I can go on it. Any supplier can go on it and provide their product through it. And when I buy something through Amazon, I can look to see what other people have thought. Why can't we have that in mobility? And that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. We're going to be talking about, and indeed showing you, an Amazon-style experience for global mobility. And then every 2 weeks after that, we're going to be showing you another bite of really fascinating technology. So we've got people coming from all over the world who are coming. I'm seeing people from New Delhi, from Cambridge, that's Pat, also from AIRINC, from Michigan, more from Boston, from Dallas, from Surrey, Florida, India. We've got people from San Francisco, from London, from Chicago, Jacksonville, Helsinki, New Hampshire, South Africa, Zurich, Minnesota, Dorset, New York. People are coming in from all over the world. So people are coming on board now. So let me start bringing in our guests and bring them on board so that you can meet our guests. First of all, let me bring in our two guests for the day. First of all, let me bring in Steve. Where are you, Steve? Steve, great to see you.
Great seeing you, Brian.
How are you doing?
Doing great. Yourself?
Yeah, good. And where are you today?
I'm actually right outside Boston.
Cool. Okay. And I know we've got your colleague as well, Morgan. So let's bring Morgan on too.
Sure.
Okay. Morgan, you there?
I'm here.
Hey, good to see you, Morgan.
Good to see you too.
And where are you today?
I am on the South Shore of Massachusetts. Nice.
Weather good there?
It's fair.
Fair, right? Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing there's some bad weather coming in on the eastern seaboard too, or so I'm told. But anyway, let's move on. Steve, for those people who don't know AIRINC, and I suspect almost everybody does, but those people who don't know AIRINC, just tell us a bit about what AIRINC does. And I mean, you're the CEO and president, so give us the sort of the overview as to the company.
Sure, I might use up your whole hour there, Brian, but
oh no, you can't do that. That won't be allowed.
No, what AIRINC does, we empower our clients with the highest quality data, the leading edge technology, and our thought leading advice to really help them effectively deploy talent across the globe. That's essentially what we do.
Cool. And the name, where does the name come from?
It actually stands for, AIRINC stands for Associates for International Research Incorporated.
Cool. Okay, and we've got Morgan as well. So Morgan, tell us a bit about yourself. I mean, how long have you been with AIRINC, and what's your role there?
So I have been with AIRINC for 23 years. I had the great fortune of leaving Boston University with a master's degree and a desire to travel the world and get paid to do it, and found my way at AIRINC, starting as a surveyor, a cost of living surveyor, going around the world collecting the price of a loaf of bread in supermarkets from Uzbekistan to Ukraine. But now I'm the global growth leader at AIRINC, which has many responsibilities, but germane to today's conversation, responsibility for thought leadership and for our advisory services and benchmarking practice. So I'll be drawing upon that knowledge to help the audience today.
Excellent. Okay, well, it's great to have you both on the shows, and we're getting loads and loads of people coming. We're already up to nearly 180 people who have come on board, and the numbers tend to grow as takes people a bit of time to come on board once we go live. Let me bring our other guests on. Michelle, where are you? So how are you doing, Michelle?
Hey, Brian, I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. And you're going to be talking us through some research later on and some polling that we've been doing.
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to that. And then, of course, last but by no means least is our regular, the one and only Julia Onslow-Cole. Julia, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. And what are you going to be talking to us about today?
China, Singapore, an update on the proclamation, and then something about Europe.
Okay. Well, really looking forward to a great day. And as I said, tomorrow we've got the Benivo Bites. I forgot to say that if anybody wants to come to the Benivo Bites technology section, it'll just be live on LinkedIn, or if you want to register, you don't have to register. You can just go on the Benivo website. But otherwise, we're just live on LinkedIn. But let's start off, and let's. I'm just going to move Steve and Morgan and Michelle backstage, and Julia, maybe you can just sort of we'll spend a couple of minutes talking about all the changes in immigration that we've had. And I think you wanted to start in Asia Pacific, wasn't it? And,
yes.
And questions, point to the audience. If you've got questions for Julia, or indeed later on for the rest of the audience, then please do, use the comments box like you always do, and just tell us everything that, ask us all the questions that you want, and we'll do our best to answer all your questions. So Julia, tell us, okay, let's do some immigration. Tell us about what's been going on the last week.
Thanks, Brian. So, we've been talking about this outbreak of COVID-19 in Beijing and how that's sort of set back really the confidence that we had seen, particularly internally in China. But the really positive news is that we now have 19 countries which are issuing visas for returning visa holders after Ministry of Foreign Affairs have given an invitation letter. And the latest countries on that list are now Mexico, Indonesia, Turkey, Malaysia, and Switzerland. So this is really positive news. And also we're seeing now 7 countries where you can get fresh work visas for China. And that's the US, Japan, Korea, Germany, Singapore, and now France and Canada. So again, really, really good news. But I wanted to give a really practical tip that I had from my colleague Becky Shear yesterday morning. And she said that if we look at all of our experience in applying, particularly for visas to get people back to China, she said it doesn't seem to matter what country you're coming from. So they're not really putting a big emphasis on epidemiology, but really everything seems to hang on how senior the person is, or not just senior, but how relevant they are to the important project that you're explaining that they need to come back for, or the economic reason. So if they are senior, then that's easy, because their senior role, you can say, well, they're in charge of the project. But if they're more junior, you have to really draft it very carefully to show how their presence is really linked to that project. So I hope that that's a really good top tip for everyone when you're looking at those visas. And then just moving quickly to Singapore.
Actually, Julia, whilst there's just a question that came in on China whilst you were there, and actually I say China, but it's Hong Kong. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment with the new security law. Are you seeing any issues there surrounding immigration from a Hong Kong perspective?
No, but really interesting when I get to Europe is that it was actually discussed in this whole discussion by the Europe about the travel ban, about whether to actually put something in relation to Hong Kong. So whilst it might not be affecting immigration directly, it's certainly right on top of the antenna from a geopolitical perspective.
Okay, and I think you're going to move on to Singapore next. Is that
yes,
right?
So elections on the 10th of July, which if you come from the UK seem really quite weird that, you know, you announce an election and it's next week, and there's a big scramble of people wanting to come back to Singapore, but obviously difficult because of the stay-at-home notice. But now there's 5 countries, and these are Australia, China, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, and Brunei. And if you're coming into Singapore from one of those countries, there's a slightly relaxed stay-at-home notice. So it's important to note it's slightly relaxed. But the other thing to say is we're getting lots of inquiries from people wanting to go from China to Singapore and to return to Singapore to work. And they're asking, can we use the air bridge? And I think the really important thing to say is that you can't use the air bridge. The air bridge is for business travelers. At the moment, it's mainly government officials, but it's business travelers. So, you know, that's quite important. So I was just going to go on and say a couple of words about the Presidential Proclamation in the US, and thank Charlotte Slocum, who's head of our consular practice, for this update. So you'll recall that we discussed this last week, huge news, and we said it's affecting people who are outside of the US, don't have a visa. And these people will find it, well, can't come as H-1Bs, Ls or Js until next year. Now, what we had thought was there was a sort of, not a loophole exactly, but we had thought that if you were holding, say, a B visa, like a visit visa, then you're all right, that strictly speaking, you're not affected by the proclamation, and then you could switch to an H1 or L. But on Monday night, the White House issued an amendment to the proclamation, and basically they made it very clear you can't do that. So that's very disappointing. The other thing to say is the proclamation is causing a lot of hardship, particularly we have split families where, say, one person went to the US on an L, and then the spouse was going to join them. They cannot now join them until next year. Also, we're having a lot of hardship, not just by the proclamation, but the fact that the US still has this ban on people coming from the Schengen area. So we've had several people who've had to go outside the US. They have visas, but they've been stuck by the travel ban. They've had to return, say, to the UK for a funeral, and they can't get back to the US. So our advice on those is to go to Mexico and sit it out in Mexico for 14 days. So that is a way to get back to the US. And I just wanted to finish to say that there is so much uncertainty with regards to how the proclamation is going to play out, and particularly for people who are already in the US and they're not sure about their position because their visa is about to expire. And although on the face of it they should be fine, our strong advice, which is in tune with what everyone else is saying, is do not travel unless you absolutely have to. The Department of State is still waiting for guidance, and I really think that's the best advice that we can give. And then I was just going to quickly finish on Europe, and I wanted to thank my colleague Christine Sullivan. There's been this enormous tension, and we have discussed it week after week, about how really we've seen all of the countries in Europe really split in response to in their response to COVID-19. If we compare this to how they've been in the Brexit negotiations, you know, they've been tightly coordinated. You know, we've seen in Brexit how Prime Minister from the UK, Theresa May, you know, went knocking on the doors of everyone in Europe and, you know, tried to split them apart, but was unable to do that. They held together, but in COVID-19, they're really split apart. And there's been these long discussions that were all over the weekend about the final announcement that came last night about what's going to happen around the travel ban in Europe. And what we had thought is that probably everyone was arguing about the US, which is now on the list of countries which is not acceptable. But it turned out, and Christine Sullivan gave some really fantastic insights on this, that it was nothing to do with the US. In fact, they were all in agreement that the US should not be on the list of allowed countries because of epidemiology. And in fact, there isn't even an if that's with the US. So with China, China's not allowed in, but it says if they allow people from the Schengen into China in an exception to their travel ban, then they'll give the same reciprocity to China. But there isn't even that with the US. So they were all aligned with the US. And it's also, I think, because they're quite fed up that there's still this Schengen ban for people from the Schengen countries going to the US. So what we have is we have this list of 14 countries and China with this if. And basically, this is all based on countries where they say that there's a similar number of cases to the EU, where cases are going down and they're taking a similar approach, and there's reciprocity for travel. But what this tension really was about, we found out, was the fact that some countries wanted to adopt a much more pragmatic approach and look mainly at their tourist industry rather than epidemiology. But the important thing to say is there is this exception, which was negotiated by Fragman and others, for highly skilled travelers who really have to go to the Schengen area for economic reasons. And that will really help US citizens. But the last thing I want to say is that this announcement is non-binding. And the worrying thing is it came out last night. And when I was speaking to Christine, we've been already, on behalf of clients, ringing around countries saying, look, according to this announcement, we can, you know, bring this person in. And the borders are saying no. So the whole situation is super fluid. It's also, the airlines can be fined if you're turned back at a border. So everyone that you now send, you really have to make sure they're armed up with the legal authority to enter. And, you know, we've had a number of cases just this morning where on the face of it, we thought people could enter and they can't. And there's particular problems with people from the UK because, you know, we are regarded as having quite a high rate of COVID-19 still. So it's just a top tip. You must check before anyone goes.
Thank you so much. I'll bring in the guests, but I've got a couple of questions that have come in as well. Let me just bring in Steve and Morgan, and I'll bring Michelle in a bit when we go on to the research. But let me just, whilst I've got, just before we go on, Julia, one question that came, which I thought was quite interesting. Will US dual nationals be able to travel to the EU under the travel ban to circumvent the US travel ban?
Will US, EU, yeah,
exactly.
Yes. Well, if you're a dual national, you can use your EU citizen to go yes, they won't, you know, the fact you have US citizenship and another citizenship, you can choose to put your EU citizenship hat on to go.
So the issue isn't the country you're coming from, it's the nationality that you have.
Well, this is the thing. This is exactly the thing. The person that we, you know, the person that we were making inquiries with, it's, you know, I think this is why you need to have some clarification for the borders, because I think it's all going to be interpreted very differently.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia. Let me now bring Michelle in. I'm going to move the conversation on. going to move the conversation on to talk about some of the issues that we're facing now. What I want to start talking about now is some of the post-COVID challenges that we're facing from an industry perspective. When we ran the show last week, we talked about the impact of coronavirus on the RMCs. And somebody, I can't remember who, asked the question, well, what about the supply chain? How is the supply chain being impacted? So what we did was we thought we'd do some research. So Michelle, maybe you could just tell us a bit about the research we did, and we'll have a discussion, but let's not release the findings just yet, because I'd like the audience to tell us what they think too.
Sure. Yeah. So like Ryan said, the question was raised about the supply chain. And so the research and the polling was sort of focused on which industry in the global mobility supply chain do you think has been most affected by COVID-19? So curious as to those folks who are out there listening and watching, what your thoughts are. So if you can put them in the chat box, and then, Brian, I'm curious as to what your opinion is.
Yeah, so the sorts of areas that you might think about, for example, is temporary housing. Is that, obviously they're all impacted. We've got temporary housing, we've got shipping, we've got DSPs, others in the supply chain, cultural training, language. Who do you think has been the most impacted? I know it's quite a negative question, but who do you think has been the most impacted in our industry? I don't know. I know it's not your line of business, Morgan and Steve, but do you have any views on, who you think has been impacted and, how people are surviving?
Go ahead, Morgan.
My gut reaction is they've all been equally impacted. There have been way less initiations, so I would think that they're all facing tough times.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, and if we look at, sorry, you're saying, Steve.
Yeah, makes sense. It seems there are no kind of new moves. There are some that are more domestic, so that's kind of maybe helping out. But the international, I would have thought that all of them would have been impacted.
Okay, and let's see what we're getting comments in from the audience. So let's see what the audience says. Melissa Medford has said temporary housing. Terry Maloney, household goods. Immigration. Temporary housing from Carmen. What else are we seeing? Pet owners still waiting on their pets. All less impacted are the RMCs. Temporary housing. So we're getting lots of different views. Maybe Michelle, you can tell us what the survey showed.
Yeah, so the comments are interesting. They are, from what I could see, are generally in line with the survey results. And 55% of respondents did think that temporary corporate housing industry has been most impacted, followed by the moving shipping industry at 27%. 12% of respondents thought the DSPs were most impacted. And then there was a comment that it was, kind of all of the above. And it is hard to really gauge. But I think we can all agree that they have all been impacted. But based on the folks that I've talked to in the polling and some of these comments, it does seem that people do think that the temporary corporate housing industry has been most impacted.
Yeah, lots of comments. This is from Mark O'Reilly. Mark has said, the logistics of shipping has been a big challenge. Server just released a video on this. For international shipping, 2 sets of rules need to be reviewed. So similar to immigration, shipping is a big pain point. And shipping of household goods was from Kaushik Mukherjee, K Hall, DSPs. It's fascinating. I suppose there's different ways of looking at it. I would take the point that many DSPs are fairly small, lean businesses without huge overheads. So whilst they might not have much work to do, they probably don't have that much by way of outgoings. Temporary accommodation, of course, by definition, has got leases to pay, and maybe there's certain levels of staff they have to keep going just to maintain the fabric of the building. So it might be harder for them, but they probably tend to be larger businesses. And then shipping similarly, I mean, they will have, trucks and warehouses that, are going to be really, really stuck with no, lots of fixed costs with no variable revenues coming in.
And this is the biggest, generally, historically, the busiest time of year for the shipping companies. So they're probably
I think it raises the question: when is the next peak going to? I don't mean peak in terms of infections. I mean peak in terms of the business the business building up. When are we going to get back to some level of moves? I am starting to see. I don't know what others are seeing, but I'm getting a number of messages pretty much every other day now, every day, from people who have been let go. So I think we are seeing some of the furloughing coming to an end and hard decisions being made. So I've got a horrible feeling that the next couple of months are going to be fairly tough. Which in a way brings me on to another subject, which is that from a mobility perspective, I think we're sort of caught in the middle here. And we actually had a question on this, and I just wanted to raise it with the panel. The question was from Simon Mason, who I know is watching the show. Simon, if you want to comment on it, please do. But Simon works with Grable, and the question he wanted to ask AIRINC was this. He said, starting now and in the post-COVID landscape that we're moving into, we will see a nexus of the business wanting to reduce the mobility cost in industries negatively impacted by this pandemic. Okay, in other words, the line are going to turn around and say, you've got to get costs down for businesses generally. And that's going to collide with the increased demands of the assignees who now are going to want more support and benefits because of their increased fears around their personal and or family safety if we face a similar challenge again. We're going to want, or the assignees are going to want more support around repatriation, out-of-pocket costs, larger housing units if they have to work from home again, enhanced medical cover. So we're seeing on the one hand pressure from the line to push down cost, and on the other hand maybe pressure from the assignees to push up cost because they need better medical cover, larger housing, etc. And I think actually there's even a third dimension to this, which is there's going to be pressure from the RMCs and the supply chain to push up costs because their costs have gone up. If you look at, say, a household goods company, they're going to have to practice social distancing. They're going to have to use personal protective equipment, all of which is going to push up cost. I seem to remember Bill Grable saying on the show a few weeks ago that could add $30 to a move, just the cost of the PPE alone. So I suppose the question Simon ended up asking is this: what would be AIRINC's guidance to mobility leaders caught in the middle in order to help mitigate against this collision course? So I'll throw that one out. Maybe I'll throw that out to you, Morgan. How do we cope with this collision that's going on between the pressure to keep costs down and the pressure to provide a better service?
Morgan, can I just interject though? Because Brian, one of the things that we have to think about is what happened a decade ago too. A decade ago, now there's special factors that we're seeing in the COVID situation, but what we saw a decade ago from the Great Recession was a proliferation of a lot of more policies, whether it was the increase in the usage of Host Plus or the commuters or business travel or even permanent moves. So there was beginning a process already about value alignment. So aligning the value of the purpose of the move to the actual cost. And so even at AIRINC, we even developed an agility index, which was a much lower index for the traditional balance sheet index of both COLA index and a housing index, to address and make it more like someone's moving to the new location to live more like a local. And so that was something that companies started adopting. So there's been this trend over the last decade to move to this value alignment. Now, what we're going to see in this COVID situation, well, I'll hand it over to Morgan for her recent work with a bunch of different clients, is we're adding those factors that you just saw. So we have been looking at cost and that value alignment or that value optimization of mobility. But now we've got these additional factors of duty of care and these other elements. So Morgan, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, and let me, before you do
Sure.
more, let me just feed in some comments that we've had from the audience. Here we've got Lena Redcoe. We see that assignees want more services and higher budgets for housing because of the pandemic. And then conversely, we've had Fiona saying, we already have received the request from large clients to lower fees due to COVID-19. And we've had Kerwin, who in fact is our guest next week, saying, maybe the question has to be taken from a resiliency lens, how those impacted could repurpose what they have to serve new needs, housing offered to extend healthcare capacity or stay home facilities in countries where required. The same can be done for other impacted sectors. It is about how we flex our resiliency muscles so we focus on offense and be resilient. So those are some of the comments. But Morgan, tell us where you are. How do you think mobility can handle some of these challenges that we're facing?
Well, the first thing we're hearing from a lot of companies is that this is an opportunity for mobility to help the business understand what the best talent option is. So, you know, instead of lazy resourcing where we throw an expat at an opportunity, we think very carefully about if we should use a local, if we should use an expat, or if there's a creative assignment type that we could leverage that could be lower cost. So I think what we'll see is the best way to save money is to resource our talent smarter, better. And that probably means less traditional expats and treating those traditional expats that we do have quite well and making sure that that package is robust enough to take care of them when they're there. But if we have less of those expensive but maybe critical assignments, we can have alternate assignment types that could save us money. So, you know, we've heard a lot about people leveraging unaccompanied assignments or commuter arrangements because that can help allay the employees' concerns about bringing their family abroad at a time when they don't want them to be at risk. Or, you know, commuter assignments can keep the spouse or partner and their job at home while the other person can travel, so it avoids issues with career. So I think the opportunity is to be an advisor to the business on the best way to use the talent that we are going to need. And so I don't think we want to go slashing and burning the packages of people that we're putting out on these assignments. In fact, we're hearing that the few that we do send, we need to take good care of. That being said, if a company hasn't looked at their traditional expat offerings in a while, they may have missed an opportunity to adopt some of the lower allowance levels that are out there, or to get rid of some of the fluff that has appeared in packages over the years. So there are areas to take things away, but by no means don't take somebody's housing allowance away or their COLA away or their duty of care away, but maybe just think about structuring that in a cost-effective way.
Okay, and I know you've done some research on, I think you called your report Smart Approaches to Cost Savings. And we were chatting in our green room earlier, and you said that actually you've done quite a lot of stuff since that came out in terms of conversations you've had with clients on your advisory council. Can you tell us about some of the smart approaches that you think that companies might be adopting?
Steve, do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead. Okay.
So, you know, one of the things that we're seeing is something called a managed relocation cap. And a managed relocation cap is a way to put a budget on the cost of the relocation so that we understand what the cost of that relocation will be and we don't exceed that cost. And the great thing about a managed relocation cap is that we have that cost predictability, but then we can go to the employee and say, this is your cap. Let's say it's $27,000. How would you like to spend that cap on a variety of services? And those services mean that the employee is not just getting the cash, they're being taken care of. But if they want to ship, 5 dogs and they don't care about shipping a 40-foot container, and that's how they want to spend the money, they can, as long as it's within that relocation cap. So we get cost savings, we get services, and we also get an employee experience that's preferred because the employee was able to spend the money the way they want to. So I call it a win-win-win because we get 3 great things out of that. And just looking at our stats from this, only 16% of companies are using a managed relocation budget. But in the tech industry, which tends to lead with creative practices, 45% of them are using this approach. So that's a good way that we can be creative and smart, because we're getting that win-win-win. So that's an example that I just wanted to share, because I think that has a lot of potential.
Okay, and we've got a few comments coming in. So I'll just throw a few of the questions out. Questions for Steve. Appreciate all the great surveys AIRINC is generating. We're all seeing discussions on virtual assignments. Actually, I'll leave that. I'm going to park that one, because we are going to talk about virtual assignments in a moment. Question for you, Morgan. Will we see the use of more local or local plus arrangements?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, obviously, we've seen a huge increase in local plus over the past several years. And it can be a lot less expensive to use those arrangements. And, you know, they work really well in certain country combinations. They don't work well in high wage to low wage combinations, or, you know, low to high. They can have problems. You know, most people that I've been talking to say that they think they're going to increase their use of short-term business traveler and commuter, and not so much the one-way moves, that they're just going to try to leverage quicker hit type arrangements to get people into the locations. And when it comes to local offerings, they're thinking about local hires instead of maybe localizations. But I do think the trend of using more one-way transfers or local assignments will continue to be as robust as it has been, but I'm not sure that that's going to be the panacea under COVID.
Okay, and another question that's come in, this is, let's pull this one up. This is from Ed Hannibal at Deloitte, and also the chairman at ERC, who's been a guest of the show just a few weeks ago. And he says this: given the immigration challenges, do you see intra-regional potential moves as these governments might collaborate around COVID? I suppose what he's getting at is less, for the sake of argument, Americans coming on assignment to Europe, but more Europeans going around Europe, or similarly in the Asia-Pacific area, more intra-Asian moves rather than people going longer distances. Is that going to be part of the smart future?
And Steve, would you like to go?
Yeah, I was gonna just state that, yeah, I think the answer is yes. We've seen that trend going on. Even when we look at our particular databases of home and host combinations, we've just seen exponential growth in the intra kind of regional potential moves that we see within our database on what clients are using. So we're going to see more of that. Okay.
Interesting comment coming in here from Jeremy Chando at Bournes. Have we commoditized the service industry too far? Cost is critical to our businesses, but looking after our key talent surely has to be balanced with great service experience. My take on that, for what it's worth, is that you may be precisely right, but I fear that there's not much we can do about it. And I think the secret to me is going to be is moving with the times, and maybe moving from analog to digital. I suppose I would say that, coming from a tech company like Benivo. But I fear that whilst we can upgrade service, I think it's going to be hard to stop the commoditization of the service too. Maybe I'm negative on that. I don't know what Steve and Morgan you feel.
No, there's always every business, you almost have to have continuing innovation, because if you don't, it's going to commoditize. And so as you go in here and look at the key talent, I'll go back to what I was saying is about that value alignment. And again, your key talent, you don't want to be penny wise and a pound foolish. Those are pretty key for the business. So you got to make sure that your mobility strategy is gonna be aligned with your business strategy and talent strategy for you as an overall company to be successful. And that just goes without saying. So you might be investing more in some areas because it's something about the growth of your business needs that talent in a particular area.
Okay, and we're getting lots of other comments coming up. I'll read a few of them out, and then I think we need to move on to another area of conversation too. Lisa Johnson, interesting point. Split family moves are also increasingly on the radar. Is that something you guys are seeing? Yeah. Yes,
definitely. Lots of feedback that companies are doing that because they want to save money. Frankly, it's cheaper sometimes to send just the employee and not the family, but also because the employee is often willing to go on the assignment, but is less wanting to take their family and expose their family. So they feel like that's a good middle path or middle ground. And certainly if you don't have an unaccompanied policy, you should have one, because that it has become more common.
And Jacqueline Van Haften, her response was, Lisa Johnson, in that case, expat divorce will most likely increase as well.
Oh dear, I'm sorry, that's terrible.
Yeah, it may well be true though. So it's a sad but fair comment. So let me move on though. And in fact, Michelle, let me go to you. I mean, we've been talking about the types of assignments and smart assignments, and that sort of raises the question actually about traditional assignments. And I think what we're talking about is traditional assignments seem to be, going out of fashion a bit. So tell me about some of the research that you've been doing around this.
Yeah, so I started having some conversations with folks, thinking ahead to today's conversation with Morgan and Steve. And one of the kind of questions and polling that I was thinking about was, the traditional balance sheet, and is it still relevant? And I know a lot of organizations do still use that approach. And then we just started thinking about from a generational perspective, is it still effective? So the official polling question was, who do you think the balance sheet approach is most effective for? And before we reveal the answers, I'd be curious to hear what the audience thinks, and from Morgan and Steve's perspective, this is your line of work. Do you have an opinion about the balance sheet and who it is most effective for in today's environment, and the types of assignments that you're seeing?
And I think the sorts of people, we're talking about generations, so maybe the baby boomers.
Oh yeah, sorry. So let me clarify. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So right, we were looking at the baby boomers, Generation X, and the millennials as sort of the who do we see it's most effective for?
Oh, you want to take? You're asking. So I think in terms of, I guess we don't look at this as generational aspects. It's really how strategic the role is and the critical role is. I think that's where the balance sheet is going to approach more. So, depending upon the role that the individual is in, it could be a millennial or a boomer or whatnot. It's the strategic nature of the role that they're going on assignment, and that's where I think the balance sheet is going to be playing. We don't try to get into the generational role, although, on the surface, you would think that the younger they are, they might be in a development role or whatnot, so it might be less used in that area. But there could be some millennials or Gen X, Y, Z, in terms of that might be a critical role in a critical location, and that you want to put them on a balance sheet as well.
Do you see organizations with younger assignees asking for a different approach?
I think other
than the balance sheet?
Yeah, I don't think they're asking for a different. I think there's a more of a willingness to kind of be flexible and be able to go on an assignment because they're looking for the experience. One of the things that we do see is the experience of younger people. They want to actually put that on their CV, or they want to be a global citizen, and so they want to go on assignment. They want to work in a different country to learn different cultures, nationalities, etc. And so they might be able to take less and be much more flexible in terms of what's being offered, and that's what we typically see in a development kind of package.
Well, Brian, before we reveal the results, Morgan, is there anything you wanted to add?
No.
No. Okay. So Brian, you want to do the big reveal?
Yeah, let's put it up here.
All right. So we've got the official poll results. 59% of folks thought it was most effective for baby boomers, 27% for the Gen X, and just 14% of the millennials. So that was what.
I'll tell you where I am in all this is that I think, in a way, COVID-19's changed everything, and it's because it's made everybody adopt technology. And the phrase I've heard is baby Zoomers. The people in their 70s and beyond. I'm sure we've all got sort of elderly relatives who've been doing Zoom calls who maybe never heard of Zoom 3 months ago. And I think, and also people doing online shopping that they never did it before. I've got a feeling that that this whole question about which generation adopts technology is actually slightly a last year's question, because I think now the question is everybody's adopting technology. And I do wonder, as part of that, whether this whole question of the balance sheet is actually now, as I think Steve was saying, it's not so much going to be a generational issue. But I actually wonder, and I'm going to be controversial because I've talked about it for years before, but I do wonder if we're actually beginning to get to the stage of the death of the balance sheet, that we're going to see so many people going on, whether it's managed lump sums or expat light or lump sum plus or whatever you want to call them. But we're going to see people going on really more and more skinny packages. And that what we call the full fat, the traditional package, the tax equalized package, is going to be becoming very much the exception. I remember many years ago talking to one mobility director, and he said to me that his stated aim was to have no expats. That was what he actually wanted to do. And what he meant by that, he still wanted to have lots of people moving. He just didn't want to have anybody moving on a traditional expat package. And his aim was to get rid of all of them and just be a person that aims on moving people on a costed, cost plus basis rather than a tax equalized basis. Do you think we're away from that, or do you think we might be getting towards that over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, Brian, it is controversial, but people have been saying that for a while, though. Every time a kind of a recession hits or whatnot, there always seems to be, the balance sheet's going to go away. But the issue is that you have a disequilibrium of where the talent is sourced and where the talent is needed. And they're not everybody's going to go on a particular light version or whatever. If you really need a particular skill set and a technical need in a particular area, by golly, you want to incent them to go, and they could stay where they are. It's not like they're jumping up and down to go on that move. And so the balance sheet actually helps them make it happen. And so I don't think, will it be a less as a proportional of all moves, international moves? Yes. But it will be for those critical and strategic talents. It's something that's going to have to be needed to be successful for your business and your talent strategy to be successful.
Okay, and Morgan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we'll see the death of it. In fact, what I find fascinating, especially in talking with some of the tech companies, some of the more fast-moving tech companies, is they started out using host-only packages, and now they're having to creep back and add some home-based balance sheets, because a balance sheet allows you to move talent anywhere that you need to in any country combination, and it allows you to take care of your employees. And we're in a state where we need to do that. And so I think we'll actually see that it still is a very important and go-to approach that companies use for those reasons. So you can't read the eulogy yet, Brian. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I think most people will probably agree on that. So let me move on. So we're probably not at the death of balance sheet. I said I wanted to be provocative, but certainly I look at it, and to me it does feel a bit of a 1950s concept, and I think we are we are moving. So, but that's what we're here for. We're here to encourage debate. What I do want to do, though, is to move on to another area. And I know we had a question for you earlier about this, Steve, and I promised we'd get back to it, which is virtual assignments. And before we get onto that, Michelle, you've been doing some more research into this as well. Do you want to talk us through the research we've done on virtual assignments?
Sure have. So yeah, this question I saw come up earlier, and we were discussing it, you and I, Brian. Will virtual assignments become a reality in the next 1 to 2 years? Actually, some clients I was working with since COVID happened, is looking into that as an option. I'm hearing about it more and more. Will it become a reality? I think time will tell. When we polled the LinkedIn world, when we asked the question, will it become a reality in the next 1 to 2 years? The majority of people thought that it would be used to a limited extent, about 60%. About 29% said definitely it's the wave of the future. And another small percentage, 12%, thought highly unlikely, it's too complicated. So I know this is something you want to dig into.
Yeah, I want to dig into. I'm also going to bring Julia back on stream because I know that a lot of this has got immigration perspectives as well. So we've got Julia with us as well. But let me start with Morgan and Steve. What do you think about virtual assignments? Do you think this is going to be a reality, or do you think it's one of those things that we talk about and maybe won't quite happen?
Yeah, I'll hand it over. Morgan's done some research on this, and so I'll hand it over. But before I do, it's one of the things that we're seeing the broader even work from home. I mean, look at all of us probably now, or we're working from home, and what's happened is that those expats came back. They came back home and they were working, remotely, and they're starting to think again, like, wow, I can do this. I can work with my colleagues. It's all working well. We can get there. Is it some sort of combination of a business traveler, commuter, new policy, kind of all together that could actually? There is going to be some complexity. So it'd be great to hear from Julia. But Morgan, you want to talk about the research and what we're hearing from other clients and how they're actually adopting the virtual assignments?
Sure. Yes. I mean, we did a virtual assignment benchmark study, and we asked if companies had virtual assignment policies, and only 3% said they had them. But 40% said they were considering adding one in the coming year, and 58% said they think virtual assignments will increase in the upcoming year. And I think it's important to note that virtual assignments might not be their own policy type or their own carve out. They might just be a variation on a commuter or a business traveler type approach. And I think we're going to see a wider spectrum of creative solutions at this lower end of the spectrum in terms of the shorter end of the spectrum of assignment types, and virtual ones will just be a part of that. And companies know that they're difficult. They know that there are immigration, corporate tax, PE issues, there chargeback issues. They know that. So I don't think they want to use them with reckless abandon, but they know that it's something they can have and they're stable to use if it makes sense. And they're also looking at the softer side of this. The compliance side is a big piece of this because it's a lot to look at, whether or not it's feasible. But the softer side are, is there the cultural adaptability to be the boss of people in Belgium if you're sitting in the US and you don't understand Belgian culture? What about time zone differences? What about the health and wellness of the employee that might have to be traveling back and forth or taking calls at 3 o'clock in the morning? So I think that, companies are looking at this, but the ones that are doing it well are thinking through both the compliance issues and the softer side, and thinking about when it would make sense to use this type of arrangement. And there will be, some cases where it will make sense to do it, and there will be a lot of cases where it doesn't.
Okay, and looking at comments, this is from Carol Nell. I think Carol is with MSI. Our clients were already using virtual assignments, especially for millennials. Also, because work permits are difficult to obtain, they decide to rotate 1 week abroad and 3 to 4 weeks at home. Julia, what's your perspective on that? I mean, is that potentially a minefield, or is that something that could be done?
I mean, I think you know, it is a bit of a minefield, you know, because you know, it is actually, you know, not in accordance with most countries' immigration laws if you're actually, you know, working properly rather than being a business visitor. And I think a lot of companies were really shocked when they started to do an audit of where their people were at the beginning of COVID-19. And I know that many companies I've talked to, you know, did not realize that actually some of their people were working from holiday homes in various countries. So they were already holding quite a lot of risk. And, you know, yes, last week we talked about Estonia, you know, setting up this very new and exciting visa that you can just, you know, live in Estonia and be freelance, or, you know, work from, you know, just work for yourself. And I think we will see a proliferation of that kind of visa to try and attract people to countries to, you know, set up themselves as a base. But, you know, I really agree with everything that Morgan said, that people will become more creative and that they are aware of the risks. But, you know, in many cases, the immigration risks are very minor compared to, you know, the tax risks.
Okay, let me feed in some of the comments that we've had. Jeremy Chanda, virtual assignments will kill our businesses. How will GM sell mobility and the benefit of being in country if signees can just sit across a laptop and manage their employees remotely? And then from Lena, our clients are worried about the economic employer concept will add to the mix along with the posted workers. And more comments coming in. Virtual assignments while working with Indian companies can be quite a challenge. And then Ed Hannibal, remote work is the exciting new expansion for mobility. We've just proven the concept. Mobility is just morphing, huge opportunity for our industry. We understand compliance and cross-border activity. And that, I mean, that's fascinating. We've had two almost extreme views. On the one hand, we had Ed saying, this is the future, it's very exciting. And Jeremy saying, this may be the future, and actually it's very scary for our industry. And we can see that, and I appreciate that they come from it from different perspectives. Jeremy is with a household goods company, Ed is with a consultancy firm, so they've got different perspectives. But there's no doubt that this is changing our industry. And the question, going back to the survey, is to what extent does this actually happen? You know, my guess is the response to the survey, I'll bring Michelle back into this, is that the response to the survey is broadly right, which is that, you know, what it said is that to a limited extent, that seems to be the vast majority. I mean, only 12% said it's highly unlikely, and I appreciate there are all sorts of tax and immigration issues surrounding it, but nonetheless, I suspect people will find their way through something. But it's, on the same hand, it's not going to be every assignment isn't going to be virtual. But the question is, I suppose, it might depend on the industry we're in. I don't know, Steve Morgan, final word. Yeah,
I think that the interesting thing is we call, you know, we do what we do is global mobility, and the question is that really the right phrase for it, right? Is there a rebranding effort that could go into where we work, the work location, those type of things, and it almost needs a rebranding of what we do if we're going to be doing things like commuters and virtual assignments and work remotely and all those. It's really how do we actually deploy our assets around the world to actually get the job done. So that's going to be an interesting thing with all the compliance and everything else with it. But global mobility is starting to see there's different elements of mobility, right? There's career mobility, there's across mobility, there's all sorts of mobility. The question is, do we start rebranding ourselves in terms of where we're at? Morgan?
I think that's it. I mean, this is an opportunity for mobility to shine. Mobility has all of the knowledge that's needed to make creative solutions work. And in the future, we're going to need more creative solutions, and global mobility's responsibility will broaden across the spectrum of different things that they need to be working on. And so this is a great time for mobility to showcase that they can help with all of this, that they can help build the ways of working of the future, that they actually have the knowledge to bring all of this together. And so I would say, see this as a great opportunity, see this as a way to move things forward, to be part of the solution, and embrace the fact that we are now going to be moving into different, as Steve says, different types of mobility that we can all help make a reality for our companies, and also improve engagement with employees because they have more disparate ways to choose how they engage with their company.
I think that's definitely right. And also what Ed said as well, I think that, you know, we're seeing so much strategic advice that's needed now. And I think that's what clients are really relying on, you know, for the strategy, and so much innovation that you can do in the current landscape.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking at some of the comments coming through, but I think we are sort of moving to an area where it is becoming much more strategic in terms of what we're doing. I'll feed in some of the other comments here. You need a suite of assignment plans. You need to use them wisely, and one approach is simply not there. But other comments, just trying to pick them up now, here for another one from Jeremy. It's polarizing, to say the least, what's going on. But I think what we're going to see, pull up another one, a rise of virtual assignments is inevitable, but opens a wealth of opportunities such as access to a global talent pool. And I think that's a really great thing. And I think, going to the point that you were making, Steve, you talked about, whether the term is right. And in fact, we sort of touched on this last week on the call. And, I'm beginning to think actually that, the term for our industry always changes. We've had expatriates, we've had international signees, we've had global mobility, we've had talent mobility. And I do wonder if we're actually moving to an era where maybe it's something along the line of workforce deployment. And as I think Ed Hannibal put somewhere, I can't see the comment, but he put somewhere, it's going to be about not just pushing employees to work, but it's also about pushing work to employees. And the good news in all this is I think it will make our industry much more strategic. That's not to say there won't be difficulties and bumps in the road and casualties on the way, but I think we are in a period of change which will be quite fascinating. Sadly, though, we are pretty much out of time. So I try to finish this on the hour, and we've hit the hour mark. So all that really remains for me to do is, actually, before I thank the guests and sign off, I just want to remind everybody about what we've got coming up over the next day and week. First of all, as I said at the outset, we've got a technology briefing tomorrow, and that's again live on LinkedIn, so the same place you found me today. And that is on the whole question of creating an Amazon-style experience for mobility. And then we're back again next week for the view from the top. And that again is next Wednesday, a week today at the same time. And we're delighted to have Kerwin Guillermo, who is the head of global mobility at HPE, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, and the chairman-elect at ERC. So we've got a great week ahead. What I do want to do now, just to end up, is to thank Steve and Morgan from AIRINC for coming. It's been great having you on the show. So many, many thanks. And to thank Julia Onslow-Cole for her wonderful weekly immigration updates, and Michelle Durkin for all the assistance you've been giving me producing the show, and for all the wonderful research you've been doing. So Michelle, really, really appreciate your input. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you all again this time next week, and indeed tomorrow for those who want to come to the Benivo Bites session. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Cheers.